I need you standing at attention because what I'm about to break down is one of the rawest examples of how the streets and the rap game collide in the worst possible way. Montana 700, a name that was just starting to buzz in the Dallas rap scene, is now sitting in federal custody facing charges that could bury him for decades. This isn't some state case that might get pleaded down to probation. This is the feds, and when they move, they don't miss. Let me paint the full picture for you, because this story has layers that go way deeper than just another rapper getting caught up. This is about ambition, authenticity, loyalty, and the price you pay when you refuse to leave the streets behind even when the spotlight finds you. Montana 700 didn't come from money. He came from Wood Oak, a neighborhood in South Dallas, where survival isn't guaranteed and opportunities are practically non-existent. This is the type of environment where you either find a way to eat or you starve, and Montana chose the hustle early. We're talking about a young kid who was around the game before most people his age even understood what trapping meant. Older homies, family members, people in his circle showed him the blueprint: how to flip products, how to stack cash, how to build a reputation that keeps you safe and respected. By the time most teenagers are worried about high school drama, Montana had already touched more money than some adults see in years. Word travels fast in the hood, and people started knowing his name not because of music but because he was making real moves. The type of moves that get you respect but also get you noticed by people you don't want watching. Local police knew about Montana 700 long before the federal government ever said his name out loud. What made Montana different from a lot of other hustlers was his presence. He wasn't moving in silence like some people do. He had confidence, swagger, the kind of energy that made people pay attention whether he wanted them to or not. You could see it in how he carried himself, how he talked in interviews, how he showed up in public. Montana wasn't trying to blend in. He was loud, bold, unapologetic about where he came from and what he was about. The hood loved that energy, and when you have that kind of pull in the streets, it's only a matter of time before music becomes part of the equation. And that's exactly what happened. While Montana was still active in the streets, he started turning those same stories into lyrics. The late night runs, the close calls, the money, the pressure. All of it became the foundation of his music. And here's the thing, people believed every word because they had seen it with their own eyes. In a rap industry full of people faking the funk, Montana had the one thing you can't manufacture: real credibility. When he said he was moving weight, nobody questioned it. That authenticity is what separates a local rapper from someone who can actually blow up. But let's be real about what authenticity costs in this game. Rapping about the streets while you're still in them is a dangerous combination. Those same bars that made fans respect Montana also became breadcrumbs for law enforcement to follow. Investigators don't just listen to rap music for entertainment, they study it. They look for patterns, names, locations, timelines. When your lyrics match up with known criminal activity and you're living a lifestyle that doesn't add up to a regular income, that's when files start getting built. Montana's early reputation put him on a radar he probably didn't even realize was tracking him yet. So you've got this young man standing at the intersection of two worlds. On one side, the raw rustle of the streets that gave him everything. On the other side, the promise of rap stardom that could have pulled him out. But the problem is he never fully left one world to commit to the other. And that's where everything starts to unravel. Montana's transition into rap wasn't overnight, but when it started gaining traction, it felt authentic because the streets had already stamped him. Before any blog or playlist picked him up, people in Dallas were already reciting his bars. That's real organic buzz, the kind that can't be bought. His early tracks sounded less like entertainment and more like confessions. Flipping packs, dodging raids, counting dirty money, these weren't metaphors. These were slices of his real life stitched together with raw energy and delivered with zero polish. His first videos were gritty, shot in the same neighborhoods where his reputation was built. No big budgets, no fancy production, just Montana and his crew in their element. And that rawness is exactly what made it connect. Fans weren't looking for another industry plant. They wanted something real, and Montana gave it to them in every verse. Clips of him rapping while surrounded by his people, flashing money, showing the lifestyle he talked about. Those videos went viral in his circle and started spreading beyond Dallas. But here's where things get complicated. Montana was closely connected to Zillionaire Doe, another name that was already under the federal microscope. Whenever Doe's name came up, Montana wasn't far behind. They were seen together constantly, not just as friends but as representatives of the same movement, the same lifestyle. That connection gave Montana more reach and credibility, but it also meant that if the feds were watching Doe, they were absolutely watching everyone around him. And Montana was front and center. As Montana's music buzz grew, so did the visuals. Videos went from low-budget hood tapes to bigger productions with cars, jewelry, heavy street imagery. But every element that made those visuals powerful in the rap world also doubled as evidence in the eyes of investigators. Flashing stacks of cash, referencing pounds in lyrics, surrounding himself with known associates, it all blurred the line between entertainment and self-incrimination. What fans saw as keeping it real, the authorities saw as Montana confirming exactly what they suspected. From a pure music perspective, Montana was building something that could have gone far. His delivery was aggressive but calculate. His lyrics painted pictures fans could feel. Tracks started gaining traction outside of Dallas. Whispers about potential label interest started circulating. For a brief moment, it really looked like Montana could make that transition so many rappers dream about, from trapping in the shadows to cashing legitimate checks in the spotlight. But the deeper he got into rap, the harder it became to separate his art from his past. Every performance, every interview, every song pulled pieces of his reality into the public eye. Fans praised him for being authentic, but that same authenticity kept law enforcement glued to his every move. Unlike rappers who exaggerate for clout, Montana's words carried weight because people knew they came from real experiences. And that's the double-edged sword of being too real in this industry. His music connected him to fans who saw him as a voice for the streets, but it also connected him to a federal narrative that painted him as way more than just an artist. Every view, every repost, every cosign pushed him further into the spotlight, but it also lit up the federal radar even brighter. By the time Montana was seriously moving in the rap scene, both the streets and the music industry knew his name. But in the background, investigators were piecing together his image in a completely different way. Where fans saw a future star, the feds saw a suspect whose lyrics, lifestyle, and circle matched the blueprint of an ongoing criminal case. Then came the moment everything changed. Montana 700's name didn't just randomly pop up in federal court documents. This case had been building for a long time. When the feds finally move on someone, it's because they believe they have enough evidence to take it all the way to trial and win. With Montana, the indictment lays out a story that's as much about surveillance and patience as it is about street activity. The official charges include conspiracy to distribute controlled substances, possession with intent to distribute, and interstate trafficking. The government isn't just claiming Montana was hustling locally, they're alleging he was tied into a pipeline moving pounds across state lines. That's what takes this from a state-level drug case to a full-blown federal situation. And federal cases are a completely different beast. The conviction rate is over 90%. The sentences are longer. The prosecutors are more experienced. The resources are unlimited. The investigation reportedly started after raids in Montana's neighborhood turned up drugs, cash, firearms, and digital devices that hinted at a much bigger operation. His ties to Zillionaire Doe, whose block had already been raided, gave investigators even more reason to dig deeper. The feds don't kick down doors on gut instinct. They move when they think they can connect dots between multiple players, and Montana's name allegedly came up more than once in the paperwork. One of the key pieces of evidence mentioned in the indictment is wiretap data. Court filings suggest investigators were monitoring phone calls and coded conversations where Montana's name or alias was mentioned in connection with moving weight. Even if he wasn't directly on the phone, just being referenced in those conversations can be enough to pull you into a conspiracy charge. That's the terrifying part of federal drug law. You don't have to be caught holding drugs to face decades in prison. If prosecutors can argue you were part of a larger agreement to distribute, that's enough to bury you. Then there's the issue of confidential informants. While no names have been publicly released, people close to the case believe it involves individuals from Montana's own circle who flipped under pressure. This is the classic playbook in drug cases. Law enforcement leans on lower-level players, offering them reduced sentences in exchange for testimony against bigger targets. If even one person points to Montana as a supplier and that testimony lines up with wiretaps or surveillance footage, the prosecution's case starts looking airtight to a jury. The indictment also references financial records and what they call unexplained wealth. Montana, like a lot of rappers with street ties, regularly flaunted cash and luxury items on social media. In hip-hop culture, that's normal, but federal prosecutors see it differently. They argue that lifestyle is evidence of drug proceeds, especially when the artist's music catalog or streaming numbers don't clearly explain where all that money came from. In Montana's case, the feds reportedly pulled bank records and pointed to large cash deposits that they claim match the timeline of alleged trafficking activity. Beyond finances, law enforcement leaned heavily on social media posts and song lyrics. Videos where Montana rapped about moving pounds or shipping work are reportedly included in the evidence packet. It's the exact same strategy we've seen in other high-profile cases where art gets reinterpreted as confession. Defense attorneys will argue it's all entertainment, creative expression protected by the First Amendment. But juries often see it differently, especially when that creative expression is paired with hard evidence like drugs or weapons recovered during raids. The arrest itself was a full-scale operation. Federal agents backed by local task forces executed a pre-dawn raid at a house connected to Montana. Witnesses described seeing armored vehicles block off the entire street as heavily armed officers moved in. Montana was taken into custody without any incident, but several other people at the scene were also detained. Inside the house, agents reportedly recovered firearms, stacks of cash, and digital devices they believe hold even more evidence of trafficking activity. This wasn't some quiet pickup. It was designed to send a message both to Montana and to anyone else watching. After the arrest, Montana was quickly moved into federal custody, and prosecutors immediately pushed to have him held without bond. They argued he was both a flight risk and a danger to the community. In federal drug cases, those arguments carry serious weight, and the judge agreed. So now Montana is sitting inside while the case builds against him. For a rapper who had just started making noise in the music scene, the optics couldn't possibly be worse. The severity of these charges can't be overstated. If convicted, Montana is looking at mandatory minimum sentences that could easily run into decades. Conspiracy to distribute alone can carry 10 years or more depending on the quantity the government claims was involved. Add interstate distribution on top of that and you're looking at sentences that can rival life terms. The feds know this, and they often use the threat of that kind of time to push defendants toward plea deals. Most people can't handle the idea of dying in prison, so they take whatever deal is offered even if it means giving up names or doing 15 or 20 years instead of life. Right now the streets are buzzing with speculation. Some people are questioning whether Montana will stand strong and fight this. Others are wondering if the case is even as solid as prosecutors are making it seem. But here's the hard truth. Federal prosecutors don't bring charges unless they're confident they can win. They have unlimited resources, experienced attorneys, and a conviction rate that speaks for itself. Montana is walking into one of the toughest battles of his life, and the odds are not in his favor. So why did the feds go after him? Specifically, when you really break it down, the answer becomes clear. Montana wasn't just another nameless figure moving product in the background. He had visibility. He had influence. He had a growing platform. To federal prosecutors, that makes him more valuable as an example. They love building cases where they can tie influence to criminal activity, because it allows them to argue that the person isn't just a participant, they're someone whose persona could inspire others to follow the same path. Second, there's his association with zillionaire dough. When the feds see two high-profile figures moving in the same circles with overlapping reputations in both rap and street culture, they naturally start connecting dots. Whether those connections are rock solid or circumstantial doesn't matter much in the beginning, because once your name lands in federal paperwork, it's incredibly hard to shake. Then you've got the money trail. Flashy cars, designer clothes, stacks of cash on Instagram. It's all standard in rap culture. But to investigators, it tells a completely different story. If your music income doesn't match your lifestyle, prosecutors will argue that gap is being filled by drug money. In Montana's case, reports suggest there were bank deposits, cash seizures, and lifestyle purchases that didn't line up cleanly with his streaming revenue or show money. That gave the feds another angle to build their case on. Social media and lyrics added even more fuel. Montana's bars about moving pounds weren't just catchy lines to trust to, they were treated like coded confessions. Photos of him with money, weapons, or certain associates became exhibits in a narrative of an active trafficker. It's the same strategy that's been used against Young Thug, against Casanova, against so many others. The government has learned how to weaponize an artist's own art against them, and they're getting better at it every year. Family ties and neighborhood roots also made Montana a bigger target. The feds aren't just interested in what you personally do, they're interested in the entire environment you come from. If your block has a history of raids, arrests, and drug busts, investigators will assume you're connected whether you actually are or not. Montana's neighborhood had already been under surveillance for years, and his rising visibility only drew more attention back to that same area. Finally, there's the broader strategy of federal law enforcement. They rarely go after small fish. Their goal is to dismantle entire networks. And the easiest way to do that is to grab people who sit at the intersection of money, influence, and culture. Montana checks every single one of those boxes. By indicting him, prosecutors can potentially pressure him into giving up information about other people, or they can use his case to paint a wider picture involving multiple players in what they'll call a conspiracy. So when you ask why the feds went after Montana, the answer is actually pretty simple. He represented more than just himself. He was a symbol of how the streets blend into rap culture. He was a face that made the alleged conspiracy easier to explain to a jury, and he was potentially a stepping stone toward building an even larger case against more people. Montana became a target not just because of what he allegedly did, but because of who he was, who he knew, and what he represented to both the culture and to law enforcement. And that brings us to where we are right now. Montana 700's story is a familiar one, but it never stops being tragic. A young man rises from the struggle of his neighborhood, turns his real experiences into music, and builds a name off the kind of authenticity that fans crave. But that exact same authenticity is now being used as a weapon against him in a federal courtroom. Every lyric, every Instagram post, every public appearance is being re-examined under a completely different lens. The path back is crystal clear when you trace it. Montana's early street roots gave him the credibility that fans respect, but those roots also planted seeds that followed him into every aspect of his life. His rep rise put a massive spotlight on him, amplifying not just his music but the entire lifestyle he portrayed. And now, with a federal investigation and charges officially on paper, the government is preparing to make him the next cautionary tale of how quickly street credibility can turn into legal destruction. What happens next is completely uncertain. Montana could choose to fight this case at trial, risking the possibility of decades behind bars if a jury sides with the feds. Or he could take a plea deal, trading years of his life for cooperation or reduced sentencing. Either way, his music career, the one he was just starting to build, the one that could have changed everything for him and his family, is now hanging in the balance. The dream is on pause, maybe permanently, and the nightmare is just beginning. That's the reality of mixing the streets with rap when you refuse to fully commit to leaving one world behind.